Hello, this is a live stream Supply Chain Analytics Week 6 strategy. And so bring up the syllabus. And here's where we are. We're on Week 6. I graded homework 4. And this is really the last lecture and the last homework of the first half of the course. And then next week is just review coming up for the exam. Basically in this review, I'll talk about the types of questions I'll be asking, just so everyone knows what to study. There's so much material. I'll focus on just this material. So I'll tell you exactly what to study. That's going to come up next week. Today we'll just have some really basic strategies, but a lot of the strategy is based on the language and relationships of these first 4 topics here. Okay? So let's bring up the website. Let's bring up the Canvas. And then down here we have the website. And so here's where the lectures are going to be, supply chain management. If we come down here under supply chain analytics, down here we have chapters 6, 11, 12, and 13 for the strategies. And Simke Levy really talks about strategy all the way through the text. But here, 6, 11, 12, and 13, they focus on very specific things. Okay, and so let's start. Let's download each one of these. And let's start with chapter 6 here and do the first one. Okay, the first one really is push-pull strategies. Now this is way back on chapter 6, where he's talking about inventory, but the push-pull strategies in inventory also apply to the system. In other words, a pull system is dependent on actual realized demand, and that's a pull type of realized demand instead of forecasted demand. But the pull system strictly also is dependent on the system status. In other words, what status does the system have? Does the system need another item downstream or not? And part of the pull concept or strategy has to do with Kanban systems and just-in-time. And so it's really more of a system design applied to inventory. A push system, on the other hand, is forecasted demand. You anticipate what's going to happen, you forecast it, and it's not really dependent on the system status. It creates a status to respond to the forecasts. So it's 2 different approaches. Now, it doesn't mean an entire supply chain has either one of these. It could, but a push-pull boundary is the position in the supply chain where push and pull characteristics meet. And so you can have a push system upstream, a pull downstream, or vice versa. You can have a totally pull system, a totally push system, but usually you'll have push and pull at different places in the supply chain, and there's where you get your strategy. Okay, factors in implementing the system strategy include demand uncertainty, economies of scale, lead time, complexity of the supply chain structure, and focus of the enterprise. What is the enterprise really? What's their mission, vision, values? Okay, and so these factors here is what we'll be looking at in chapter 6. Okay, first of all, characteristic of push-pull. These are the main characteristics here. Demand uncertainty for a push system. It's low uncertainty, forecasted demand, so you can forecast it, and the variability is very, very small. Over here, it's high demand uncertainty, and so you don't try to forecast it. You wait until it happens and it's realized demand. Economies of scale, because you can forecast the demand, you can have high dependence on economies of scale. Since it's very uncertain, low dependence on economies of scale. Lead time is usually longer lead times for a push system. The longer lead times then can create more inventory to satisfy your downstream demand. And then shorter lead times usually apply to pull systems, because short lead times you have to satisfy very quickly, and so it's more of a pull strategy rather than a push from creating large inventories in the entire supply chain. Now, some people would argue the last mile. If you have a lot of inventory, then you can satisfy very quickly. This is talking about not the last mile or inventory, it's talking about the supply chain strategy of a pull system up from manufacturing all the way down. Okay, next is the complexity of the supply chain. The more complex it is, the more you can't really predict. I mean, you can't. The more complex it is, the more you have inventory to cover the complexity, and so that's more of a push system. And the more simple the supply chain, you have a pull system. Well, push usually has an objective of cost, advanced planning because of forecasted demand, and usually a push system lies within efficient systems and lean systems. And we'll talk about efficient and lean systems, which is cost, in the last half of this course. We have lean supply chains. On the other hand, pull, since it is short lead times and realized demand, you have order fulfillment as an objective, as a focus of your objective, and that's very flexible because it can respond to different demands, and responsive systems, flexibility and responding to changes in your supply chain, whether it's demand, economies of scale, lead time. So you're very flexible. And we'll see this down as far as agile supply chains are concerned. Okay, next, indications for push-pull strategies. Well, naturally, we have these characteristics. Okay, but then a push-pull strategy really is within a supply chain, depends on where you find these characteristics. If you have low demand uncertainty upstream, and that indicates a forecasted demand, that's a push. If you have short lead times downstream, that's a pull. And so this is referred to as an upstream push, downstream pull, or push-pull system. Well, the push-pull system usually will accommodate continuous replenishment because you have your inventory upstream and you have continuous replenishment downstream because you have very short lead times. But the demand, the forecasted demand, is pretty low uncertainty, high predictability. So therefore, you can have the inventory, and you don't need to carry it downstream because it's short lead times. So therefore, it's continuous replenishment. It's supported with EDI. We saw that last week in electronic distributed information and point of sale. So point of sale goes upstream, so you can have continuous replenishment, so you have more centralized information. But on the other hand, if you have long lead times downstream, that implies a push system. But if you have high demand uncertainty, that's realized demand, more of a pull system. So there you have upstream pull and downstream push. So you have a pull-push system. Well, it doesn't happen as much, but it certainly happens. Now, the separable, nested, integrated strategies, what they're saying here is that you don't necessarily have the entire supply chain pull-push, but you might have pull-push in different parts of it. Okay, you might integrate, it may be nested, a pull-push within a supply chain. You have push-pull, pull-push, push-pull. Okay, it could be integrated. Pull-push could be integrated within a push-pull, or it could be totally separable. Two parallel systems to satisfy different types of downstream demand or downstream lead times. So the idea here, since we have long lead times down here, is inventory positioning. And so the inventory positioning downstream is saying, well, since we have a push system down here, we want inventory. But since it's downstream, we don't want large inventories. We want to have inventory to satisfy the different demands downstream. So we're going to position our inventory very strategically because we have a pull system upstream. We don't have a lot of inventory to ship. We're going to ship it and satisfy downstream inventory. So it's going to be very specific, different amounts of inventory for different downstream positioning. Okay, so this has to do with longer lead times downstream with industries, and the pull is shorter lead times downstream, where you have uncertain demand downstream, but short lead times, and you have high demand items, and you want to satisfy that demand very quickly. Here you have longer lead times where a push system, you can have like a car dealership. You can buy it off the lot, but if you want customized, then it's going to be pull upstream, and you have to wait for it to be shipped downstream. Okay, but you're going to have different product varieties downstream depending where you are. Where you're in New York City is going to be very, very different than Rifle, Colorado. Is very different than Boise, Idaho. Okay. Then you have upstream production strategy as a pull, and downstream distribution strategy is push. And so therefore, you're going to have more of a strategic safety stock. And there's where you have your inventory positioning. And so all of this comes together with your inventory downstream, with your production strategy upstream to bring together. Okay, so the indications for push-pull boundary is you have something called either a buffer inventory or your integration is where the supply chain is where push meets pull. It's called the push-pull boundary. You can have buffer inventory here to satisfy order fulfillment, but there's where you have your supply chain planning within your push system. So you plan on what that forecasted demand is going to be, but that forecasted demand creates inventory right where it needs to have a buffer inventory to satisfy the pull order fulfillments. Okay, and so the buffer inventory is integrated with your forecasted demand. Okay. And so now we have some examples here where you have demand uncertainty. If you have a high demand uncertainty, that indicates pull. Low demand uncertainty indicates push. So if you know exactly what that demand is going to be, you can order large lot sizes and have a push system. If it's highly uncertain, then you'll wait till you have realized demand. On the other hand, if economies of scale are very low, in other words, you're not going to produce a lot of items to drive down the economies of scale, or the product might have a slower clock speed, we'll talk about that later. That's more of a pull system. But high dependencies on economies of scale will be a push system, because the greater the inventory, the forecasted demand, you have more dependencies than on economies of scale. Or dependencies on economies of scale would indicate a push system. Well, the idea here, when you put these together, low economies of scale and pull is more computer. Okay, because there's a lot of different computers out there, and every person can have a little bit different computer. This is like a desktop computer. Even laptops can have a lot of variety. On the other hand, books and CDs, even though they have a low economies of scale because the product variety is so large, but still you want a push system because the demand uncertainty is fairly low. On the other hand, groceries, you have low demand uncertainty. Okay, you pretty much know the groceries are pretty consistent. It varies seasonally, but usually it's fairly consistent, but high economies of scale. So that's really a push system down here. On the other hand, furniture is usually pull upstream and push downstream, because the economies of scale downstream is you want to have automobiles for custom automobiles, or furniture, custom furniture. You want to have a showroom. You want to have a showroom to where you can sell. You have inventory downstream, but then if you have specialized type inventory or products, then you have your pull system upstream. Okay, so a lot of these are not necessarily strategies that people predicted. It's what they began to see what works, and so this is more or less reporting what has worked in the past. A little bit more logical is demand uncertainty with lead time. Short lead times is usually push. Long lead times is short lead times is pull. Long lead times is push. Low uncertainty is push. High uncertainty is pull. So naturally, if you have a pull here, this is definitely pull. This is definitely push. But what happens if you have long lead times? So you want a push system for your demand, but the uncertainty is fairly uncertain, it's fairly high. So then what do? Well, then you have your inventory positioning, and we saw that before. And so when you have a lot of uncertainty in your demand, but you have longer lead times. Well, the longer lead times allows you to position your inventory. So then you usually that would drive you towards centralized information to identify where the inventory needs to be positioned, because each inventory positioning will have different product varieties. On the other hand, if you have short lead times, it has to be there, but you have low demand uncertainty, you pretty much know what the demand's going to be. So let's just keep it coming. Continuous replenishment. Keep going downstream so you have short lead times. It happens very quickly. And you have a push system upstream. Okay, so the impacts here to the push-pull strategy is driven by demand and lead time that impact cost and service. Okay, first of all, lead time. Lower lead times traditionally support enhanced order fulfillment. Lower lead times. In other words, I want it in a short amount of time. Well, order fulfillment becomes a strategy then, and that's customer service in a pull system. Greater lead times traditionally support enhanced economies of scale because you can have more of a push system and lower the costs. On the other hand, demand, the aggregated demand lowers the error of your demand, because the larger the aggregated demand, the lower the uncertainty, because you have a larger amount of demand, through law of large numbers. That lowers standard deviation because the variability is lower because it's a larger lot size. The inter-demand forecasts to support supply chain strategies between stages. So since you aggregate your demand, the demand forecast between the stages then can be managed. Okay, and demand shaping, and that's aggregating demand. Now, demand shaping, in a minute we'll see demand shaping or demand conditioning, is where you can shape the demand. We saw last time where you have everyday low prices can really shape the condition of demand. You can shape the demand to where you can either increase or decrease the demand, either by sales or quantity discounts that we saw that has been seen. There's different ways of pricing strategy that can shape the demand, increase or decrease. And pricing strategy is coming here in a minute. Lowers the error through cause and effect that focuses on critical factors. Intra-demand within the stages then will support supply chain strategies within a stage. So the whole key here is balancing supply and demand with supply chain strategies. Your supply upstream, your demand downstream, just balancing those out. They can be addressed through e-business capabilities, e-commerce downstream, e-procurement upstream, e-fulfillment downstream, e-business within the business unit. So there's an overview of strategy of push-pull boundaries. Okay, next we look at the design for logistics. So there's the push-pull, usually by lead time and demand and inventory. Now let's look at logistics. Okay, here we have in Chapter 11, we design for the supply chain and something called the development chain. The supply chain is logistics, development chain is the actual product. An example is push-pull, depending on where you're developing the product. Design material and processes is designed for logistics. Design material is like packaging. Design processes are like distribution, like cross-docking. Design your logistics, supply your integration, and design your production, mass customization. So let's start with the development chain. Well, supply chain here, and your drivers over here, the supply chain have drivers of demand uncertainty, economies of scale, and lead time. And we've seen that. Demand, lead time, economies of scale. We've just seen that on the last chapter, the last series of lecture plates. Development chain, now moving away from the supply chain to the development chain. How is the actual product developed? And so this is combining your design of your supply chain with the design of your development chain, your product. It's matching the product with the supply chain. Well, product technology clock speed. And that's your project introduction. And there's where you have your innovative products versus functional products. So how do you, if you're developing an innovative product or a functional product, that's going to determine the type of supply chain you're going to have. We've seen that before. Make buy decisions, outsourcing decisions. We've seen that in relationships. And there's where you have modular products or integral products combined with knowledge and capacity. But then you have the product structure, and that is design for logistics, and that's up here. Design your material or design for logistics. The packaging, and that's going to be the material. Package it to where you don't want rounded or crazy lengths where they can't stack. You want nice square where you can stack a lot for distribution, and if you can get more product in a smaller space, then that's going to lower cost and increase efficiency. Parallel processing, there's your production. Parallel processing is you don't just produce everything linearly in series if you can help it. You can redesign your production process to where you can break these up and do them in parallel, and you can produce things faster. And finally, standardization. You can standardize, well, today we're going to see standardizing 4 different things. And standardizing things will make things much more efficient. And we'll see what that is here in just a second. Okay, the push-pull for the supply chain. Here are the dependent uncertainty. High uncertainty is a pull system. Low uncertainty is a push system. You pretty much know what the forecast is going to be. Economies of scale, low dependence is a pull. High dependence is a push because you have larger inventories, and the economies of scale can drive down the cost. Lead times, short lead times is pull, order fulfillment. Long lead times is push, cost emphasis. Now the development chain, innovative or modular, functional or integral. The clock speed, if it's fast, it's usually innovative. And if it's functional, it's slow. If it's innovative, it's going to be a fast clock speed, like high-tech products. If it's functional, it's slow, like paper clips. They're still the same design. Okay, product variety, innovative is high because the variety of the product can be high. Innovative because you can have all different kinds of designs. Actually, when the calculator came out, everyone had their own calculator, and because the design can be just the features. Right now, you buy a cell phone. It's not a whole lot of different suppliers, but the different cell phones, it's a lot of times the capabilities don't change that much. The features change. Automobiles doesn't change that much, but the features change. So innovative has a high product variety because of the features. A functional is fairly low because it does what it does, and that's all you care about. It just gets you, it just does what it does. Okay, the profit margins usually are high because of the clock speed is fast. And for functional, it's low because you have a slow clock speed, and you build, you can have large inventories, and you can have economies of scale and the low profit margins because you earn it back in volume. Okay, here's your product design. Here's some examples. A fast clock speed, if you have modular and a push system, the example here would be like cell phones. Okay, it's not the only one, but that's an example in production. Okay, but if you have a fast clock and a pull system with high uncertainty, demand uncertainty, PC, personal computer, or fashion. Fashion changes, a lot of product variety, right? And you can mix and match. Okay, there's the module part. A slow clock speed, more functional. Furniture and tires. They haven't changed that much over the years. They can in design, maybe colors or fabric, but not necessarily in the functionality. Pasta and diapers are very push because they don't change hardly at all. Okay, and here you might have some kind of a furniture and tires because you'll have inventory positioning downstream to satisfy the demand in the showrooms. So there's some examples of product design. Okay, now under the design for logistics, DFL, a lot of people are beginning to really focus on this today. And so the idea here is in packaging, here you have dimensions, design dimensions to reduce space. In other words, you make them pack better, or design the dimensions where they can be in a standard square or rectangle or box. Design the product for delayed packaging and support cross-docking. In other words, design your product to where you don't have to package the product upstream. You can delay the packaging downstream because you might have different product varieties downstream, and so you can delay the actual final packaging to support cross-docking. Parallel processing, and this is taking the series and making it parallel, decoupling a process so you can make parallel processes. This is more into manufacturing and process design. Standardization. Okay, I find this very interesting because a lot of people are starting to focus on this more and more today. You can aggregate demand to support risk pooling. Okay, and economies of scale. True. But you can create modularity. Create a modular product and or a modular process so you can standardize the functionality of a product, but it can go into a larger product. You can modularize a process, but that process can be part of a number of other processes to produce a product, more product variety. Okay, so there's 4 different types of standardization. It depends on the process here and the product. So if the product is modular, and the product it's not modular, like integral, the process can be modular. In other words, you can decouple a process in series, so you can decouple it and have it in parallel, or the process is not modular. It's one process. You can't break it up. Well, when you have a modular product and a modular process, you have one product, one process, that's all you have, then what are you going to do? You can standardize the process. Okay, so this process is standardized. Well, actually, let's start here. Part standardization. The product is modularized. Okay, I did that backwards. The product is modularized, and so you have like a cell phone or a automobile is fairly modular, especially today. You have different modules that make up the product. Now, if the process is not modular to make each of these, then you can have something called part standardization. Now, part standardization here is a standardization approach to a modular product and a non-modular process. In other words, even though you have a modular product and the process is not modular, you can create different standardized parts that go into the product. And so even though the process is not modular, that process does one thing, you can't break it up, but then you can design the process to create parts that go into the modular product. And those parts are standardized. And if they're standardized, then they have something called commonality. In other words, you have one part that can go into multiple different products. That's called part standardization. Next, process standardization. Here you have a modular product and modular process. Everything's modular. You have different modules. The process can be broken up. All different kinds of things. Well, this lends itself for the greatest flexibility, right? Here's where you have something called postponement or delayed product differentiation. You can resequencing to support postponement, and modularity of products through resequencing processes to support postponement. In other words, here's what this means. In other words, those words mean this. The idea is that if you can modularize the product and modularize the process, not only can you assemble the product later, but you can actually finish the production of the product later, because you can have a lot of variety, and that's downstream. And so what you're shipping upstream is basically the fundamental parts, the basic commodity parts. And as they go downstream, you don't have to put it together until you're right at the delivery point, right at the retail part. And there's where the process can be modularized down there. So each process is a little bit different with different products. So you can modularize the product, modularize the process, and you can delay the differentiation of the product. The product isn't defined until it's the last, at the last, very last. An example of this is different voltage requirements in England or Europe, EU, versus North America. So you can have the products, but then the products are not necessarily processed or produced, the final product, until the very end. So you can have a very efficient upstream supply chain on the commodities, but then you differentiate the product and postpone the differentiation of the product till just before the market. And that's where you have process standardization. Next is product standardization. Well, if neither are modular, here's where you have one product, one process, one product, that's all you have. You have no flexibility on the process, no flexibility on the product design. It's just one product, one process, that's it. So what I do, it's called product standardization. Well, the idea here, there's two basic ideas. One is it's similar. Downward substitution. In other words, you make something and also super product design. Start with super product design. You design a product that can satisfy only one product, but that product can satisfy multiple different requirements from the market. So it's a super market, so it can satisfy a much larger market. It's not a market segment, it's a huge market. A good example of this is software. When you buy software, you go, here's a software package. Oh, great. I need a software package to do this. To do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's great. We have this package for you. It does 50 different things. I don't want to buy 50 different things. That's the only thing we sell, but within the 50 are the 5 you want. It's called a super product design. It satisfies everything, and in that is probably what you want as far as the design of the product is concerned. Okay, and also downward substitution. In other words, the product can satisfy what it's designed for, but it can also satisfy other requirements that it wasn't designed for. It'll work fine if you use it down there too. So you can substitute it downstream, or downward substitution. It does much more than you need for less requirements, but you can downward substitute it because it'll do it anyway. Okay, and finally, procurement standardization. If the product is modular but the process is not modular, in other words, one process, you can't modularize the process, but then what you do is you have procurement standardization or equipment procurement to meet multiple internal process needs. So that process, even though it's one process, okay, the product is not modular, but the process is modular. You make sure that equipment will satisfy multiple internal process needs, because the process is modular. So the procurement then of standardization is going to be procure equipment that can meet multiple internal process needs. Even though your product is not modular, your process is. So this process can satisfy different products, not just different versions of the same product. So the product is not modular. Okay. So where would the push-pull boundary occur? Well, hopefully you can begin to see it can occur anywhere upstream and downstream. What are drivers for the location? Again, you can see it's going to be driven by your demand, your processes, your product design, economies of scale, on and on. And how does outsourcing correspond to design for logistics? Well, if you're going to outsource some of the material or operations, make sure that they satisfy your DFL requirements, design for logistics requirements. Well, finally, we have something called mass customization, which came on the scene decades ago, but it has grown in popularity because of technology. 100, 200 years ago, we had something called a craft production. Everything was handmade. Everything was made. The production, the quality of the craft going into that depended on the craftsman doing it. But then at the turn of last century, the early 1900s, you had something called mass production, where the quality of the product was in the design, and you mass produced it. So you still had quality, but it's more of a standardization of quality. This is more a customization of quality. This is a standardization of quality. But then these two began to be merged because of technology, focused factories, MRP. You have computer-aided manufacturing, computer-aided design, CAD/CAM systems, and today artificial intelligence, robotics, blah, blah, on and on and on. So the idea is that the craft and the craft production, mass production then, where you have design and on customization and high quality, and standardization of the same design came together, and it's referred to as mass customization. And here's where you can have specific products for each individual market segment, and that market segment then can get smaller and smaller and smaller because of technology. And the market has gotten smaller to where you can market it to one person, but the production there is a smaller group of market. But what happens is that you might have mass customization, the ultimate, to customize a product for an individual, depending on what their needs are. Well, mass customization have increased variety and service. Product variety, naturally, because there's a customization. Service, because it's mass produced, so you have shorter lead times. And also decreased cost and time to market. The cost goes down, and the order fulfillment becomes faster. Okay, where would these attributes be most effective in supporting mass customization? Well, first of all, mass customization is going to be instantaneous, costless. In other words, to change designs is going to be no cost, basically. It's transparent. Seamless, to move from one to the next. Frictionless, it doesn't cause any problems. Okay, so there's the idea of strategy 2, which is design. Okay, next let's shift a little bit and go to customer value. So we did the supply chain, we went into the product. Now let's go to the customer value. Okay, now customer value here in chapter 12 is conforming the supply chain to the product characteristics that create customer value. Now we're focusing on the customer. And a key term here is called market mediation. Now market mediation simply is designing your supply chain configurations, designing your logistics, DFL, but you design these characteristics to conform to the customer value expectations. So now in the supply chain, you're focusing on customer expectations. Okay, so we looked at inventory. Last time we looked at standardization and design of the supply chain. Now we're looking at the customer. Okay, so that's market mediation. And market mediation includes the lean supply chain strategies, which is lowering cost, responsive supply chain strategies, which is fast order and efficient order fulfillment and service, and then customer access that enhances customer access is e-commerce, searches, customer relationship management through e-commerce. So the idea here is that this is lean supply chain, responsive supply chain, or agile. We're going to see these in much more detail the last half of the course. So that's part, so the lean supply chain and the responsive supply chain or agile supply chain, this is going to be key in achieving customer value objectives. Then you have product selection. Coordinate the product characteristic with supply chain characteristics. Okay, there's where you have your build to order. You have manufacturing to order, you have build to order, assemble to order, fabricate to order. Well, Dell is an example of build to order. Inventory positioning is automobile. Fixed product variety is grocery, same products. We've already seen this before when we looked at the different push-pull systems. Price and demand. Design the supply chain characteristic to maintain a cost and service to be competitive with little flexibility in price. In other words, your supply chain can affect the pricing strategy. And so the pricing strategy and the supply chain needs to maintain a cost and service that's not going to be undermining the price. In other words, if the supply chain is inefficient, the cost in the supply chain goes up, that's going to affect your price and your profit margin. The price is going to go up to keep the same profit margin. So low price flexibility implies commodity product characteristics, commodity product pricing. So these two here refer to commodities. Now commodities are usually upstream, commodities are basic goods, and commodities are fungible items to where they, a characteristic of a commodity is that the source doesn't matter. The quality of the commodity is not dependent on the source, and the price is the driving factor. In other words, when you buy electricity, no matter where the electricity comes from, electricity is electricity. You don't have good electricity and bad electricity, it's electricity. So electricity is a commodity. Then you have metals. Then you have cotton. Then you have commodities are essentially the fundamental building blocks of your products downstream. So low price flexibility implies a commodity product characteristic. Commodity product pricing implies more dependency on the supply chain innovation. Well, if the pricing is the same on the commodities, the price doesn't change, it's pretty much fixed. That's what's expected. How do you increase your profit margin? Lowering your cost. So if the price downstream of a commodity is pretty much fixed, in some cases it is fixed, it's regulated, but if it's downstream it's fixed, then your profit margin depends on the efficiency of your supply chain. The lower the cost of your supply chain, the more efficient it is, the more profit margin, and therefore your supply chain in a commodity supply chain can be more competitive than another supply chain that supports the same commodity. They both have the same price, and maybe the demand is the same, but the service is better here because the profit margin is higher, and also the supply chain is more efficient. So commodities depend more on supply chains than other type products. Greater price differentiation, though, due to pricing of services implies less commodity characteristics. Internet can provide price differentiation due to service variability. In other words, when you have the internet, you can have different differentiation of prices on timing, and we'll talk about price differentiation here in just a second. Depends on timing, depends on the group, depends on a whole list of things. You can have different prices for different types of factors. Well, the internet allows you to do that. Value-added services, well, services then become important. Very important within a commodity, because commodity pricing leads to service differentiation in the market. Commodity pricing means your service then becomes your differentiating factor, not the price. It's the service of the supply chain. And services such as information access through the internet enhances customer experience and also customer control. Well, you say, let me Google it. Let me see what Amazon has. Well, that access to information and here's what you asked for, and here's other products similar. That information access enhances the customer experience. And I think we all have experienced that. If you go on Google or go on Amazon, you should start searching. It gives you all different things in that category. Okay, relationship and experiences. Building customer and company relationships. The learning relationship, customer profiles that creates customer loyalty and unique customer experiences. So the learning relationship says that the customer profiles are developed so that the service to each individual customer or groups of customers will create customer loyalty. How? By learning what the customer wants, what the customer needs, which factors will create loyalty in different customers. And it varies. Customer experience includes empowering the customer in the relationship. In other words, the customer can say, I want this or I want that. Okay. So the strategy. First of all, this strategy has been proposed. When you look at the price, here are 5 different areas of strategy. Looking at the price, high, low, the product. Okay, is the product the characteristic of the product itself? Is it durable? Is it reliable? Have a lot of features? Is it functional? Service. What type of service do you have? Is it quick? Is it fast? Is it efficient? Access. Again, access to information. The relationship. What type of relationship do you build with the customer? Okay, here's 5. These are the 5 main ones that people have identified that companies focus on or differentiate on. So what should your strategy be? Should you be an expert on all 5 of those? Not necessarily. It has been seen to be effective is that you dominate the market in one of those. You're better than anyone else in one of them. Just one. But if you dominate in one, you're better than any of them, but differentiate on another. You're better at price, but your service is different. It may not be better or worse, but it's different. You differentiate yourself. And then all the rest of them, just be adequate. In other words, the other 3, don't be so bad that it'll make them leave you. Don't be... you don't have to be good, just don't be bad. I think it's awesome. I think that's ingenious and it's brilliant. You don't have to be good at everything. Just be dominate in one thing and differentiate on another or maybe 2 others. So the differentiation will get their attention. The domination will say this is better than anyone else. And so there's a good strategy to keep in mind. Okay, now customer value measures. These are just measures. First of all, you have the lean supply chain as cost, responsiveness is lead times, customer access is experience, customer satisfaction is surveys, customer loyalty is usually behavior, retention, defections, you can measure those things. And finally, performance measurements in your supply chain, that comes from the supply chain operations reference model. And we haven't talked about that too much in here yet. We will the last half of the course. When we start looking at supply chains, what are metrics within each of these supply chains, and which metrics will gravitate toward a lean supply chain, an agile supply chain, a reverse supply chain, a resilient supply chain. Okay. Now the last one we get into the more details here of the customer pricing. Very interesting that Simke Levy had a whole chapter 13, just on customer pricing. Well, money is a driving factor these days. As a matter of fact, you can dominate in pricing, but you can also differentiate in pricing. Okay? And especially in commodities. Commodities you can actually dominate and differentiate with a very strong supply chain efficiency because you have a larger profit margin. You have the same profit margin with a lower price, then you'll capture market. So not only do you have the same profit margin, that you can have your volume with supply chain efficiency. Okay, customer pricing. Balancing customer loyalty with profit generation, called smart pricing. Smart pricing. Well, the idea of balancing this, if you have really low profit margins, you'll have really good customer loyalty. If you have really high profit margins, higher than anyone, you're likely to have very low customer loyalty. So where's that trade-off and where's that balance point? Okay. Well, people have analyzed this naturally. And so first of all, three things. Inverse price and demand relationships, if the price goes up, demand goes down, have limited applications. It's not totally elastic. They have limitations. And then demand conditioning or demand shaping can be used effectively through smart pricing. So pricing can change your demand. If you can change your demand through pricing, that demand is going to change your supply chain design. And so pricing is much more important than just profit margin. Pricing also impacts the efficiency of your supply chain. And the efficiency and design of your supply chain through your demand can lower the cost and increase your profit margin. And so pricing is not just profit. Pricing is not just money driven. It's also efficiency driven within your supply chain. And maintaining the objective of customer loyalty with profit generation, we've already said that. Okay, three things. Price differentiation, revenue management, and smart pricing. Those are the three different smart pricing, three different customer pricing strategies or approaches that we're going to be looking at. First, price differentiation. Very interesting. Here's the idea. Now, okay, what I did here, you vary your price, like markdowns, to capture a market segment. Well, if you lower the price, the demand goes up. They're going to buy more. Oh, this is cheap, I'll buy it. It costs too much, I'm not buying it. So the price demand really has a relationship. Now I have these equations here as just a reference, but down below, price differentiation, down below here is where I demonstrate what this means. Okay, here you have your demand on this axis, you have the price on this axis, and it's a negative relationship. As price goes up, the demand goes down. As the demand goes up, the price goes, well, if the price goes down, the demand goes up. If the price goes up, the demand goes down. Okay? And so the idea here is that if you have this price, here's the theory. At this price, P1, this price then theoretically then will have this amount of demand. Call it D1. Well, if you have this much demand at this much price, the area of that rectangle, P1 times D1, that's your profit. Okay? But if you lower your price, you can have more demand. If you have more demand at a lower price, then the area of that rectangle is not necessarily the same as the area of this rectangle. So even though you lower your price, increase your demand, you're making less profit. If you raise your price and you have less demand, then the area of that is less profit. So there's some optimal pricing strategy here which maximizes your profit, assuming you have this price-demand relationship. So now just to keep it simple, let the demand be a function of price, just an inverse, A minus B times P. So this line here is A over B. I mean, that point is A over B. And here's A. So A is the demand at which the price is 0. Okay, and A over B is the price at which the demand is optimized. You have the entire market. everybody will buy it. Well, that's not realistic. It's theoretical. But the theory here, so this line is not straight. Okay, it does I have all different kinds of shapes. But the idea here is the concept is important. Then revenue is price times demand. And I do the arithmetic here. Okay, but the takeaways. Not going through the arithmetic, but some of you probably will, and it's kind of interesting. The optimal price, where you're optimizing revenue, the area, is where the price is 1/2 A over B. Whatever this A over B is, half of that will optimize your revenue. Okay, but what if you had two prices? Like I'm gonna have a initial P1 price, then I'm gonna discount it. Where should those prices be? Well, as it turns out, theoretically, P1 is 2/3 and P2 is 1/3. So you divide this in thirds, and P1 is 2/3 of the maximum price, and the discounted is 1/3 of the maximum price, or half of that. And that will maximize. But that revenue then is more. Your revenue increases. And that's why people have discounts or clearances. Because if they discount it, then all of a sudden you're going to increase your revenue because you're capturing more of the demand at a lower price, where that demand would not buy it at the higher price, but it will buy it at the lower price. And so it's all about timing. Okay. But generalizing this for n greater than 1, what's really interesting, as it turns out here, with all this mathematics here, what this really means is if you have 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, whatever many pricing you have, you just divide this equally to maximize your revenue. Well, I know I go into Targets, let's say, and we have a full price. Then all of a sudden they discount at 30%. Okay. Then they discount at 70%. And then they don't offer it anymore. What's 1/3? 1/3 is 33%. 33 is awkward. 30% is close. What's 2/3? 66%. Well, 70% is a little bit more, but then it's close to 66%. So that's exactly what they're doing. It's pretty fundamental. If you're going to have two, if you're going to have a price, and then 1 and 2 discounts, discount and clearance, you can take the price, divide in thirds. If you only have 1 clearance, you go half off. Or buy 2, get 1 free. Or buy one, get 1 free. Basically, that's 50% off. So you're trying to capture more of the market, increase your demand and capturing more of the market. So all that is price differentiation. Okay, but there's more. Let's go back up here. Okay, the pricing, let's increase this again. A low price or a high price really depends on the clock speed. If it's if the clock speed is high, usually have a high price, low price. Product variety. A lot of product variety then usually has a lower price. A less product variety can have a higher price because it has less variety. And profit margins, usually a higher price have higher profit margins, low price have lower profit margins. And so, hey, here's some examples over here. Where in this 6 spaces would groceries go? Okay, where would automobiles go? Where would clothing, wind turbines, solar HVAC systems? Interesting. Solar photovoltaic cells. Okay, revenue management. So the idea here, this came out of the airline industry, and it's worth noting. Integrate pricing, inventory, demand. It's worth noting here. The airline industry has market segmentation, booking control, and network management, and so it's called revenue management. And it's good to note it because even though usually this is not used, but because of the internet and because of online purchasing and a lot of online searching and buying, then this type of revenue management then becomes much more possible and much more prevalent. Okay, well, you have leisure travelers and business travelers. The leisure travelers think, oh, they're looking for a bargain. Business travelers, they have to do it. Well, can you tell the difference between leisure and business? Well, in airline travel, yeah, sure you can, because the business travelers, they say we're business. Leisure travelers, we're going on vacation. It's pretty easy to tell. But what about other types of demand? Well, on the internet, you can identify the buying pattern, create profiles of different customers, and classify them as either a business traveler or a leisure traveler, or leisure looking for sales, business looking for service. So leisure is looking for low cost, business is high service, because they got to get there and got to get back. Sensitivity to price, leisure is high, business is low. Don't care, company's paying for it, right? Sensitivity to trip duration, low, we're on vacation, we'll take an extra day. Very high sensitivity to the duration. When I was in industry, we would have I'd be in Denver, I was in the Denver office, and we'd have a board meeting in LA. And it says, okay, I'd take a 5 o'clock flight. I'd get there in the morning. And so I'd have to be at the board meeting from 10 to 2 or 10 to 3 or 10 to 4, say 6 hours or something, 3, 4, 5, 6 hours, and they get on the plane and fly back. If I cannot be late for the board meeting. I'm a board member. And so the duration of that trip is critical, because I don't want to stay there another night, because the company says, no, you fly back. So I don't want to be flying back at 3 in the morning. I want to get back at 10 at night. Okay, need for flexibility, low. Okay, I can wait and go tomorrow. Very high, because you have to get there. Anyway, so this is becoming more, customers are becoming more demanding. And so you can identify the level, the spectrum, and where different customers fall on that spectrum. Smart pricing. Okay, now we're getting to smart pricing here. Now the smart pricing, there's two types: differential pricing and dynamic pricing. Differential is you have prices for different market price sensitivity. Dynamic pricing is you have pricing for different time. It's a function. This is market sensitivity. This is a function of time. For example, group pricing. Well, different customers, like seniors. Seniors can have a discounted rate, a military discounted rate. Channel pricing. Well, if you buy through this website, then we'll give you a discount. If you go here, we'll give you a discount. If you go here, you pay this amount. Regional pricing. Well, if you buy heavy equipment in the West, well, if you buy a tractor in Texas, that tractor probably has a large demand, especially or Nebraska or Kansas. That tractor or baler might have a pretty low price because there's a lot of demand. But you try to buy that in New York City or LA, it may be harder, maybe much higher price, because it's harder to get there. Okay? Time-based differentiation. Now this function of time is not the same as this time over here. Time-based differentiation is that, oh, well, over time, we're going to lower the price. It's kind of like discounting the price over time. Okay, and product versioning, different designs can have different pricing strategies. Okay, some product designs can have more. A simple, kind of oversimplified version of this is going to be if you package it in gold, you can ask a little bit more money than if you package it in brown. Gold and silver has a higher attractiveness than brown or something that's dark colors. Light colors are happy, dark colors are not as happy, and depending on the product. Coupons and rebate. So this is differential pricing based on the process. It says, okay, I'm going to sell this to you, and you can have a lower price if you go through the process of using a coupon, bringing it in. If you don't get it, or sending in for a rebate to the manufacturer. So there's a process that's associated with lowering the price. Why? Because some people won't do it. Some people will. And so the people who don't do it, you're going to get more money out of them. The people that do it, then they get a benefit of a lower price. And so you have a differential pricing. Now, dynamic pricing is over time. Conditions for it, in other words, you change the prices over time. Okay? So the idea here is that production capacity less than demand. When the demand increases, okay, over time, as that demand increases, you're going to lower your, well, vice versa. if the demand is lower than your capacity, then the price goes down. The price goes up. If the demand is more than your production, then it's going to go down. So really, when the production capacity is less than your demand, then you can increase the price. Okay, there's a greater demand. You can increase in demand uncertainty. If you have a lot of uncertainty, then you can increase the price because you are satisfying uncertain demand. Increased demand seasonality. What I mean by increased seasonality is that seasonality means it increases and decreases with the seasons, but increased seasonality means it doesn't have this much variability. It has this much and this much and this much. Well, when that seasonality, which is the amount of variation, increases, okay, that demand increases, and all of a sudden you can have a higher price when the demand goes down versus when it goes up. Short planning horizon. Well, if you have to produce it quickly, you have more cost in production, so you have a higher price. Low profit margins. Low profit margins can have lower prices, then you earn your money on volume. Anyway, all different kinds of reasons for changing the pricing over time. And the internet obviously will impact smart pricing as well. The menu cost, the ease of retailers to change your pricing. This isn't like in quantity discounts. If you buy more, we'll give you a lower price, but then they can change the actual percentages and everything online very quickly, and that's called menu pricing or menu cost. Menu pricing upstream, menu cost downstream. Lower buyer search price. Well, the ease that the customer has in searching can increase retailer competition. Okay, so upstream, if it's very easy to search for these items, like searching for Amazon, you have a lower buyer search price because of the internet. It's very easy for the customer to search around, and that benefits the buyer. Visibility, increased coordination throughout the supply chain, like tracking. You have a tracking number to tell you exactly where it's at. Well, increases visibility. That increased visibility is increased customer satisfaction. You know exactly where it's at, when it's going to be here, and so you anticipate it. Customer segmentation. You can create different profiles and separate the different profiles of customers and focus on different customer markets and their different desires. The internet's allowed to do that, and there's where you get into artificial intelligence. And testing, test and adjust strategies in real time. You say something isn't working. Well, on the internet, you can change it. You can change it very easily, very quickly, and see what happens. Okay, a good example is YouTube. If you have YouTube subscribers, you went from in this one direction, all of a sudden your subscribers went down. Wait a minute, let's change real quick and let's see if it goes back up. Okay, especially if you have a lot of views. Okay, which this is going to be recorded. This is going to be a live stream is recorded, and it's going to be on my YouTube channel. We'll see how many views I get. Usually it's just my students, which is fine. That's why I do it. But I do get people watching these things from all over the world, not necessarily my students. Okay. Well, that's pretty much a good overview. Boom. A good overview of strategy in the 4 different chapters. And the homework, I'm going to post the homework probably tonight or tomorrow. You'll see the homework. It's going to be right out of these lectures, right out of the, let's bring back up the website. It's right out of these 4 different types of Word files. I try not to get too detailed, but I do want you to understand the differences between each of these. You know, pricing strategy, the pricing, customer value with market mediation, and then the inventory, push-pull system, standardization. All this is very, very popular. It has become popular, and it's going to continue to be popular. And what's going to happen in the future, and is happening even now, especially because of the pandemic, is that these different capabilities are starting becoming used, or more being used, to have competitive advantage, to become more agile. So this is the end of the basic fundamental information. Now the last half of this course, I'll be talking about different types of supply chains, where the inventory, the strategy, the relationships, and the information, then all these are going to be focusing on different strategies. And different types of supply chains will focus on different strategies, enhance one strategy over the other. And some supply chains will focus on one strategy, another will focus on another type of a strategic approach. And we'll see that in the last part here with smart supply chain, global, green, lean, service, resilient, reverse, agile, etc. Okay. Well, that's all I have for tonight. I hope this helps. And this will be recorded, so I don't mind talking fast. Sometimes it's hard not to. I get excited. This material is so practical today. It's happening around us. Almost everything we buy, everything we use, everything that impacts our lives comes from a supply chain. It's everywhere. It is part of our commerce. Everything that we do. So thank you guys for listening. I hope this helps. And so you can go back and watch this video. I'll post it tonight on Canvas. And then I'll post the homework and start going through the homework. The homework is interesting too. So next week, let's bring back the syllabus just to review. Next week, I'll have a review for the exam, and you'll see what I mean by review and exam. It's focusing on just what you know, not what you don't know or what you try to figure out. It's something you should know. Great. Thank you. Thank you for your comments. I do appreciate them. They are fantastic. I think I really like this course. It's a great course. And I think every business, of course, I teach this, every business person, no matter what they go into, needs this information. Whether they do supply chains or not, they're in supply chains. They see what's happening around them. And what if they're in finance, if they're in marketing, if they're in management, if they're in sales, if they're in, it doesn't matter. Okay, I guess I'm preaching now. I'll stop preaching. As I say, I get excited over this stuff. It's very, very good, exciting stuff. But to spare you my preaching here, that's all I have for this evening. And I hope this helps. And I'm going to have office hours, Zoom, Thursday night at 7. Let's bring back the syllabus. Thursday night at 7. Not syllabus, Canvas. I'm going to have office hours down here. Let's come down here. Here we go. Thursday night at 7. Friday night at 7. and Saturday morning at 10 a.m. for people who can't do nights. And people who doesn't want to do Saturdays, you can do Thursday, Friday nights. And that's the link. You click that link and boom. We have Zoom office hours. You can ask whatever you want 3 times, 3 different times. And it's not recorded. It's just conversation. And so we'll see you then. If I don't see you then, between now and the next time we meet, please be safe. Take care of yourself. Stay healthy. Don't take anything for granted. Stay healthy. I want you to learn as much as you can with this time that we have. Take advantage of the opportunity. So, between now and next time we meet, take care.